So hi everyone, just doing an add-on to my last video regarding the lake of fire and the volcanic activity in the region of the Levant. I've talked about this in a previous video, but it's talking about the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in the time of Emperor Julian. Did God prevent the rebuilding of the Jewish temple? And it says apparently there was a serious attempt to rebuild the Jewish temple in Jerusalem after it was destroyed in 70 AD. Not only that, but the attempt was thwarted by an odd series of seemingly cataclysmic events. Fire burst forth from the foundations. So here in this story, we have evidence that the ground is bursting forth fire from this region, volcanic activity, along with a great earthquake preventing the workers from completing their works. The project was abandoned. Some accounts include assertions that the sign of the cross appeared in the sky as well as on the garments of the workers. So the project was apparently initiated by the pagan Emperor Julian. So here we have some talk of flames bursting forth and killing Herod's men in Josephus. It says, I present this possibility because an earlier account from the first century Jewish historian Josephus, in his Antiquities, he tells the story of Herod desiring to loot the tombs of David and Solomon. Before reading the account, let's recall where the Bible says their tombs were located. David, we are told, slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Solomon likewise slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, his father. Thus, David and Solomon were buried in the city of David, which was adjacent to the Temple Mount. Also, the original temple was said to be built in the city of David, so the Temple Mount temple was possibly or highly likely built in the wrong place. Josephus goes on to describe how some of Herod's men died by a flame that burst out when they attempted to get into the tombs. Here's the quote from Josephus. As for Herod, he had spent vast sums about the cities, both without and within his own kingdom. And as he had before heard that Hyrcanus, who had been king before him, had opened David's sepulchre and taken out of it 3,000 talents of silver, and that there was a much greater number left behind, and indeed enough to suffice all his wants. He had a great while and intention to make the attempt, and at this time he opened that sepulchre by night and went into it and endeavored that it should not be at all known in the city, but took only his most faithful friends with him. As for any money he found none, as Hyrcanus had done, but the furniture of gold and those precious goods that were laid up there, all which he took away. However, he had a great desire to make a more diligent search and go further in, even as far as the very bodies of David and Solomon were. 2 of his guards were slain by a flame that burst out upon those that went in, as the report was. So he was terribly affrighted and went out and built a propitiatory monument of that fright he had been in, and this of white stone at the mouth of the sepulchre, and that at a great expense also. So the various Christian accounts of the entire affair mentioned that the Jews had told Julian in the building of the temple in the 300s that worshipping God according to their religion required the temple to be rebuilt. This could be why Julian proposes that the letter is as follows. In the times past, by far the most burdensome thing in the yoke of your slavery has been the fact that you were subject to unauthorized ordinances and had to contribute an untold amount of money to the accounts of the treasury. Ever since Vespasian, about 72 CE, the Jews had been paying the Romans special Jewish taxes like the fiscus judicus. Of this I used to see many instances with my own eyes, and I have learned of more by finding the record which are preserved against you. Moreover, when a tax was about to be levied on you, I prevented it and compelled the impiety of such obloquy to case here. And I threw into the fire the records against you that were stored in my desks, so that it is no longer possible for anyone to aim at you such a reproach of impiety. My brother, cousin, Constantius, of honoured memory, in whose reign 37 to 361 served laws enacted against the Jews, was not so much responsible for these wrongs of yours as were the men who used to frequent his table, barbarians in mind, godless in soul. These I seized with my own hands and put them to death by thrusting them into the pit, that not even any memory of their destruction might still linger amongst us. Excuse me, this is supposed to come from a pagan emperor. Why should he care so much for these Jews of Jerusalem? And I can only imagine that he had advisors who were Jewish, and that quite possibly he was descendants of these people, also from the Herod line. And since he explains here that his brother or his relative was Constantine, so therefore this could be an admission to this possible truth. And since I wish that you should prosper yet more, I have admonished my brother Ullius Hillel II, 365, your most venerable patriarch, that the levish which is said to exist among you, the taxes paid by the world Jewry for support of the Palestine patriarch, should be prohibited, and that no one is any longer to have the power to oppress the masses of your people by such exactions. Okay, so here's tax again coming up. Forced taxation of the people of this region to the beasts, so that anywhere during my reign you may have security of mind, and in the enjoyment of peace may offer more fervent prayers for my region to the Most High God, the Creator, who has deigned to crown me with his own immaculate right hand. Wow, well, this is quite interesting from a pagan emperor. These words prove he was not pagan at all, and despite that fact, he was probably not Christian or believing in Christ, but Jewish in his faith. For this, it is natural that men who are distracted by any anxiety should be hampered in spirit and should not have as much confidence in raising their hands to pray, but that those who are in all respect free from care should rejoice with their whole hearts and offer their supplant prayers on behalf of my imperial office to mighty God, even to him who is able to direct my reign in the noblest ends according to my purpose. This you ought to do in order that when I have successfully concluded the war with Persia, I may rebuild my own efforts the sacred city of Jerusalem. So here's an intention to rebuild this city. He has a faith which is consistent with Judaism of that time. So, which has been close to the Jews since Hadrian in 135 CE, which for so many years you have longed to see inhabited, and may bring settlers there, and together with you may glorify the Most High God therein. So another account comes from John Chrysostom, one of the more famous of the early church fathers, an archbishop of Constantinople and a doctor of the church. He spoke of the event in which one of the homilies of the Gospel of Matthew, even in our generation, in the instance of him who surpassed all in ungodliness, Julian, many strange things happened. Thus, when the Jews were attempting to raise up again the temple at Jerusalem, fire burst out from the foundations and utterly hindered them all. And when both his treasurer and his uncle and namesake made the sacred vessels the subject of their open insolence, in one was eaten with worms and gave up the ghost. The other burst asunder in the midst. Moreover, the fountains failing when sacrifices were made there, and the entrance of the famine into the cities, together with the emperor himself, was a very great sin. for it is usual with God to do such things when evils are multiplied. And he sees his own people afflicted and their adversaries greatly intoxicated with their dominion over them. Then to his display his own power, which he did also in Persia with the respect to the Jews. Socrates, Scholasticus, AD 380 to 439. He's talking about Julian rebuilding the temple. Such were the bishop's words, and on the night following, a mighty earthquake tore up the stone of the old foundations of the temple and dispersed them altogether with the adjacent edifices. Terror consequently possessed the Jews on account of the event, and the report of it brought many to the spot who resided at a great distance. When therefore a vast multitude was assembled, another prodigy took place. Fire came down from heaven and consumed all the builders' tools, so that the flames were seen preying upon mallets, irons, to smooth and polished stones, saw hatchets, adzes, in short, all the various implements which the workmen had procured as necessary for the undertaking, and the fire continued burning among these for a whole day. Could this have been gases coming up out of the earth? And it appeared to these people that it was fire coming down from heaven. Theodoret, 393 to 458. When they had begun to dig and to carry out the earth, a vast multitude of them went on with the work all day, but by night the earth which had been carried away shifted back from the ravine of its own accord. They destroyed, moreover, the remains of the former construction, with the intention of building everything up afresh. But when they had got together thousands of bushels of chalk and lime, of a sudden a violent gale blew, and storms, tempests, and whirlwinds scattered everything far and wide. They still went on in their madness, nor were they brought to their senses by the divine long-suffering. Then first came a great earthquake, fit to strike terror into the hearts of men quite ignorant of God's dealings, and when still they were not awed, fire running from the excavated foundations burnt up most of the diggers and put the rest to flight. So we've got earthquakes, we've got fire coming up from the ground, fire coming down from heaven. There's some geological events happening here at the time of them trying to rebuild this temple. Sozomen, 400 to 450. Though the emperor hated the oppressed and opposed the Christians, he manifested benevolence and humility towards the Jews. This is common in these Roman emperors. You know, like when Nero and his wife Poppaea Sabina showed mercy to the Jews and persecution and martyrdom to the Christians. He wrote to the Jewish patriarchs and leaders as well as to the people, requesting them to pray for him and for the prosperity of the empire. Now, why would he do that? He's a pagan. Why isn't he praying to Jupiter? But no, he's praying to the God of the Jews. And when I say Jews, I mean the southern kingdom of Judah. They're in the realm of Judah, and they have the temple had the temple in this area. They are believing in Talmudic Judaism. They are not Hebrew any longer. They have intermixed with the Idumean converts, and they are no longer part of the Hebrew nation. They have been cast to the earth by God in 70 AD. In taking this step, he was not actuated, I'm convinced, by any respect for their religion, for he was aware that it is, so to speak, the mother of the Christian religion. And he knew that both religions rest upon the authority of the patriarchs and the prophets. But he thought to grieve the Christians by favouring the Jews, who are their most inveterate enemies. But perhaps he also calculated upon persuading the Jews to embrace paganism. They already were embracing paganism. It's called the Kabbalah, the Talmud, and sacrifices, for they were only acquainted with the mere letter of Scripture and could not, like the Christians and a few of the wisest among the Hebrews, discern the hidden meaning. Did this emperor know this? I think he was related to these people, and of course he knew it. Events prove that this was his real motive, for he sent for some of the chiefs of the race and exhorted them to return to the observance of the laws of Moses and the customs of their fathers. On their replying that because the temple in Jerusalem was overturned, it was neither lawful nor ancestral to do this in another place than the metropolis out of which they had been cast. He gave them public money, commanded them to rebuild the temple and to practice the cult similar to that of their ancestors by sacrificing after their ancient ways. The Jews entered upon the undertaking without reflecting that according to the predictions of the holy prophets it could not be accomplished. They sought for the most skillful artisans, collected materials, cleared the ground, and entered so earnestly upon the task that even the women carried heaps of earth and brought their necklaces and other female ornaments towards defraying the expense. The emperor, the other pagans, and all the Jews regarded every other undertaking as secondary in importance to this. A great earthquake occurred, and by the violent agitation of the earth, stones were thrown up from the depths, by which those of the Jews who were engaged in the work were wounded, as likewise those who were merely looking on. The houses and the public porticos near the site of the temple in which they had diverted themselves were suddenly thrown down. Many were caught thereby, some perished immediately, others were found half dead and mutilated of hands or legs. Others were injured in other parts of the body. Could this be gases coming up from under the earth in this region, like in the Dead Sea, setting the foundations on fire? When God caused the earthquake to cease, the workmen who survived again returned to their task. The Jews, I believe, were just in this state, for instead of regarding this unexpected earthquake as a manifest indication that God was opposed to the re-erection of their temple, they proceeded to recommence the work. But all parties relate that they had scarcely returned to the undertaking when fire burst suddenly from the foundations of the temple and consumed several workmen. So here we go, we've got several historians documenting or talking about this event within reasonable proximity to the time that it happened. It happened in around 363 when Julian was the emperor, maybe a bit later. And all of these historians were contemporary in that time. So I think this proves that during this time period there was a lot of earth events happening, and they are related to this rift in this region and to the volcanic and gas coming up from out of the earth. It may have been happening during the Crusader time. I can't find much information on fire coming from the earth during this time. Who knows, perhaps the church has hidden this if there was any. But it tells us that it's going to happen again in Revelation 20 when the beasts and the dragon and Gog-Magog are thrown into the lake of fire, and that we will see this region act up again. And I think that we may see it soon if they try to initiate this Silk Road, Belt and Road project and this big Israel uniting the Ukrainian region and the Khazarian converts with the known land now of Israel or Palestine as one big entity controlling a global trade, trying to resurrect like a phoenix from the flame the city of Jerusalem and its trading power under the new Silk Road. And I think we may just see something big happen concerning earth events and the Dead Sea and the rift in this region. And if we look at this Dead Sea Rift region, it goes right up the Red Sea through to the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, up into Anatolia. And if we look at where this rift goes, it goes all the way from down here in Africa up to Lebanon. And there's a lot of volcanic activity up here in Turkey And all around this region, it goes up around the Mediterranean, which could affect the Ukrainian or the big Israel region. So, if they want to tempt fate with God, I think that they are tempting something possibly happening in the near future in this region concerning earthquakes and volcanic activity. This is my call. I could be 100% wrong, but the Bible does tell us that the lake of fire, these beasts in the end times who are left, the dragon, Gog Magog, and what's left of the beasts of the sea and the earth will be thrown and cast into this lake, which we know historically now refers to the Dead Sea. So I'm going to be keeping my eyes peeled for that. Any activity in this region concerning earthquakes, volcanoes, and geomagnetic activity. Thanks again for listening.